Great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth, edition or episode from the EliteHR live Q&A. As I said just before we formally started, I can't believe that it is 4 months and the fourth time that we're running this. If you're joining us for the first time, very warm welcome. If you're joining us for the second, third, or fourth time, also a very warm welcome. You would have noted that the format is a bit different. So JP and I are fully embracing the remote world of work. He will be presenting and discussing and engaging from where he finds himself tonight. And I'll be presenting from where I find myself tonight. And yeah, we want to engage with you on a couple of questions that we have received. And we've sort of themed tonight, I think, very much aligned to where we find ourselves in South Africa at the moment, which is in a adjusted level 4, if we can all keep track on the various iterations and levels that we find ourselves in, but we are very much back into sort of remote working. And you would have noted some of the core themes that we'll be discussing. So I'm looking forward to just sort of, sharing some of that with you. Just also want to make sure that you can engage, so please fire away in the chat functionality. Where do you find yourself tonight? Okay, your location, Joburg, Cape Town, Durban. Fire away in the chat. Let's make sure that that is working. Got Midrand, Richards Bay, Vanderbijl, Krugersdorp, Wilmarie, welcome back from Maclear. Vanderbijl again. Joburg. Krugersdorp. Great. Not everyone has responded, so I'm going to wait 2 more seconds. I want to see more responses coming through here. Where do you find yourself tonight? Okay, people not responding yet, looking for the chat functionality. Nonetheless, most of you can respond. And again, I want to really invite you as we go through tonight's session. Okay, if at any point in time you have a question on what we said, please stop us, put up your hand, let's engage. We will have dedicated time at the end to do so. But if you disagree with something that we said, if you're not sure, put up your hand and say, look, Janko JP, can you just please elaborate on that? I'm not really sure. The intention for us really is to engage with you. You can make use of the chat. You can send me or JP a direct message if you are hesitant to sort of share it in the public forum. I'm quite sure that by now, after 18 months of doing this day in, day out, and being in your profession, you know how to find the DM functionality on Zoom. So please reach out to us if you want to come into the conversation. We'd be most happy for you to join the conversation. Put up your hand, I will unmute you and you come in. I think general rules is, again, keep yourself muted, camera off. If you want to put your camera on when you contribute, you are most welcome to do so. So JP, where do we find ourselves tonight?
Yeah, I think we're in an interesting situation at the moment in lockdown level 4 again. It feels like we're back where we were a year ago. And I think a lot of people are, the first round, they were very courageous and willing to work and put in the time. But I think there's a lot of people that are deflated at the moment. Going into the level 4 lockdown, the third wave, it feels like it's never going to end. People's morale is down. People are missing social connections. Some have been to the office, some have not. And the biggest question we've got is, how do we get our employees engaged? And how do we keep them connected in a time where it feels we are so far away from each other?
I think, a key thing, JP, and you touched on that, is that importance of the social connection, which we are deprived of. Incidentally, just this morning, I gave a full hour-and-a-half session together with the Insurance Institute of South Africa on the importance of that. So I'm just going to share my experience and just my view and just what some of the research state, some of the findings. I think probably one of the stakeholder groups that is really suffering, in my opinion, is HR.
Yeah.
I think we've been tasked with the last 18 months to look after the rest of the business. But who's looking after us? You on the call as HR professionals, who's looking after you? You should be looking after yourself. Okay, so if you're treating the rest of the business as a stakeholder group, you also, who's filling your cup? So, and how do we start that? If you've done wellness surveys, etc., look at what is happening in HR. Look at where your state of well-being is, where your colleagues' the state of well-being is. If you're in a leadership position, engage one-on-one. Also engage one-on-one if you're not in a leadership position. Just engage with your colleagues. Now, interesting is, if you look at some of the latest research that was done on the importance of social connection. So I'm citing some research by CSS Insight Surveys that they did in 2020. 33% of respondents cited the lack of social connection, so that feeling disconnected from your employees, as their biggest challenge, their biggest concern. Okay, so if there's anything that HR professionals should concern themselves with, it is with social connections. That is followed by about 22% of people that said that, look, working remotely, I feel a bit disconnected from what my company is doing. And 20% said that I really struggle with the whole work-life balance, work-life integration, lifestyle experience. That is a challenge. But the majority actually said that the fact that I cannot engage with my colleagues like I used to, that is a biggest driver. So how do we get around that? What are some practical things that you want to do? And that's a key thing of Elite HR Q&A is practicality. So how do we, as HR professionals, support the business in developing that? I want to just share 6 things, JP, that we found with our clients that is beneficial. So to create that social connection, to reduce that virtual distance, that we find ourselves in. And the first one there really is to sort of encourage, those acts of kindness. Very often, and we've spoken about this, I think in episode 1, when we spoke around the concept of well-being, a key thing in addressing well-being and wellness is to create opportunities for others to give. So as a team, as a profession, when you look after the needs of the business, create those platforms where people can give, where they can give to others, where they can display those acts of kindness. Partner with CSR, do CSR initiatives, various drives that you can look at. So I strongly encourage you to look into that. When we then look at the second thing that you can do, it is to set up almost that, I want to say, fun committees. Okay. Yes, work-life balance is a challenge. So how do we bring some fun into the play? Have those committees. They can be the custodians of icebreaker questions, quizzes, etc. It is key that we bring in that social element, because behind social connection sits non-work related personal engagements. Okay, so make sure that all teams have got some kind of fun committee. Very importantly as well then is to celebrate achievements. Don't wait for month end, year end, etc. Bring in acknowledgement. Okay? And it can be as simple as, if a team has done something well and you want to sort of recognize them for their efforts, invite the CEO, the COO, the CFO, someone senior in the business to the first 5 or 10 minutes of a meeting to in person thank the team and acknowledge them for their efforts. So bring in those personal components. Tied to the second element that I shared, the fun committee, is to really instigate informal interactions. Okay? That is where you engage on non-work related matter. And this is actually sort of tied to the 5th tip that I want to leave you with, which is to create space at the top of meetings. Okay. Now we see that There's a rise in meetings because people don't know when to meet and when not to meet. Okay, we can have another conversation on that. That's a key part of what I discussed this morning. But create space at the top of a meeting. The first 10, 15 minutes, allow time for non-work related chatter and banter. Now, if you've got a need to get onto business, if that is your social style or your personality preference, you need to rein that in a bit. Okay? You need to be very conscious around creating that space where people can engage on trivial matters. Okay? So make use of that time at the top of a meeting. We have internal meetings that we actually start 1:45 right through to the next hour. And we know that first 15 minutes, people are expected to be on time. But for 15 minutes, we engage in banter. Okay? We have a Monday morning meeting. Every Monday morning, all our consultants, we get together. We have sight of what is happening the week. Where's priority to make sure that there's equal workload distribution, to provide support. But a key part of that first 15 minutes is to check in on how everyone is doing. There's a fun question of the week that we rotate. Okay? It's important to create that space. Tied to the fourth one, and we actually see some of our clients have this, is to have a room open. Okay? Have a meeting room, a meeting link. It is like your canteen, it's your virtual canteen. You can pop in there when you want to. You don't need an invite, there's no agenda. You might find myself or JP there, we're having a bit of a chat and you come, you join us. Okay? Engage and create those type of practices. And then very importantly is to have those one-on-one engagements. And what we very often see is people are waiting for their managers to instigate this. Okay, yes, managers need to take ownership. If a manager and a leader is not doing that, they are not, in my opinion, deserving of the title of being a manager or being a leader. It might be a manager, but definitely not a leader, because you need to show intentional leadership in this new reality that we find ourselves in. But nothing prevents you from scheduling and setting up time to engage with your manager, to engage with your colleagues. Okay, so don't wait for HR to bring in some kind of policy. Okay, we are HR, we need to bring it in, but you can also lead by example. Okay, set up those practices, because where we find ourselves today is we don't know when post-COVID will be. Okay, so we have some clients where they will say that, look, no, when we reach level 1 again, and we don't know when that is going to be. In my opinion, there will never be a post-COVID. COVID is here to stay. The level, etc., is going to change, but this is the new reality. Now, you hear me not saying the new normal. I will never say the new normal. To me, this isn't normal. It is a new reality, and I might change my tune in 2 or 3 years' time and bring in the word normal. But people ask us, they say, but look, if COVID is no longer a threat, are we going to go back 100% of the time? Okay. So the question that we really posed with is, will work forever be remote after COVID? And how do we, JP, how do we deal with that? There's so much uncertainty, and then it's work from home, and then come to the office, and then remote, and then hybrid, and yeah, it's just so much uncertainty that we're dealing with. What advice can we offer people?
Yeah, I think, Janko, you raise a very specific topic there that has been challenging a lot of businesses, and we've been receiving a lot of feedback from companies around, should I bring them back? Should I not bring them back? Should they be working remotely? Should I keep them remotely? Should I bring them to the office? Should we implement a hybrid model? And I think, if we just quickly look at the context of the stats, 39% said they'd rather quit their job than go back to the office. So this was a survey done, a large segment of the population. And then also remotely, 64% said they would want to work permanently remotely. So a key thing to see there is that not everyone wants to work remotely permanently. And I think it also depends on what type of organization you are, what type of industry you work in, what's your type of role that you fulfill. And based on that, look at, how can we best service the clients, the business, keep it sustainable, but then also bring in the employee demands and kind of what they need and what they want to have. So I think it's a very key balancing act between what does the work allow me to do What do I want to do, and can I do it in that environment? So I think firstly, as HR professionals, we need to look at our workforce and say, what are the kind of personas, if I can use that word, in our workplace? What's the type of individuals, the type of work they fulfill? How do they need to be at the office to fulfill this work or not? Then based on that, kind of look at, okay, so what kind of support structures can we put in place for the individuals who can work from home to work from home, and individuals who can't work from home to support them to stay connected to those who are working from home. So I think from a human capital perspective, there's a big piece there that we need to do around supporting business and understanding, what that future looks like. We can't necessarily always just leave it to business to make the decision. Sometimes they've got a specific agenda. They feel, everybody is can work remotely or not remotely. So I think as a strategic partner, we need to be able to give them the input to say, can this be done remotely or not? And then how do we then mitigate if it cannot be done remotely? So I think that is a key thing. But I think ultimately, it doesn't matter what decision the company makes. There are going to be people who are unhappy. There are people who are going to be dissatisfied with whatever decision you make. And I think a key trend that we're seeing is people resigning from their businesses en masse. And it's been an interesting experience. And you would have seen a lot of articles online and a lot of articles in the news around it. So Janko, how do we as HR professionals make sure that we keep our talent in the business, not lose them through the resignations, not lose them from frustrations in terms of remote working and the changes that are happening? So how do we keep our talent and not lose them to the market?
Yeah, I think if that was that's not an easy question to answer, JP. And I'm going to get to that, and I would like to respond to that. I just want to make a comment as well to what you said around, the type of working environment. I think a key thing that one has to consider is to guard against it just being a CEO's preference. We do find ourselves in a space now where if it can be done remotely, let's engage on that. So there is a balance, okay? And as HR professionals, we need to make sure that both sides are being considered. That is the side of the employee, their preferences, and it is the requirements of the business requirements. It cannot just be the one or the other. And it is a balancing act. So really, when you engage with your business, with line managers, if you have a line manager, and we've got clients like that, it is, can I use the word old school type manager, where if I don't see you, it means you're not working. That is the preference of the individual. Then you need to spend time coaching them and helping them understand that, look, that is not the case. Then you've got some work to do in the system to shift it to being output based, okay, not presence that requires that. So that's the one side. But also, if you do find yourself in a situation where it is better to collaborate, because I think we also need to understand that engaging through a virtual platform like this, it's not synchronous communication. Okay, it is more tiring. This morning I delved into the research on why we experience Zoom fatigue, MS Teams fatigue, Skype fatigue, any type of fatigue. And one of the big reasons, it's not synchronous. So our brain is working a lot harder to try and make sense of what is being said between the lag and the internet connectivity, etc. That's why you feel more tired at the end of a Zoom day or an online day than an in-person day. You need to also consider, if you do bring that policy into place, and we'll talk a little bit about that, when do you actually recommend people engaging in person? Okay, that could, this lack of social connection could be one of the reasons why people leave. Okay, now not a lot of research has been published in South Africa, JP, on why it is important or why people actually leave. I just want to share some of the most recent, as recent as April this year, stats in the US. So in the US, obviously a much larger workforce than us. So the percentage might sound small, but it's a sizable number of people. They're close to about 3% of all workers resigned in the States, just in April. Okay. up to 40% of people in the United States specifically are actively looking. Okay? Now, there's a lot of reasons and why it might be. So if you're not sure, first of all, make sure that you do have exit interviews, okay? That you understand why people are leaving. Okay? Really check in with them. Do a trend analysis. I mean, that is where you need to start to understand why people are leaving your organization. If you feel that they might not feel comfortable speaking to you as an internal employee, then you outsource your exit interviews to a third party, okay? So that they can connect with them. So make sure that you do that trend analysis. And I think we need to understand that people are on burnout, just reflecting on that first conversation and that lack of social connection, the first part of the conversation. People are working longer hours. If you don't have good meeting etiquette and good meeting practices in your organization, that might be one of the reasons. You sit back to back, stationary, as I'm seated in here from 7 to 5, no breaks in between. I'm going to look for another place, believe me. Okay? So make sure that you at least then have those practices to avoid burnout. I think one of the things that we also saw is people actually re-evaluated their life. When that happens very often when you are faced with a traumatic experience, is you question why you're doing what you're doing. So that could be the reason. It could be organizational practices that's sort of driving people away, and you need to understand and find out what that is through your exit interview process. Or it could be personal circumstances that, look, this is no longer my calling. This is no longer my why. I see myself venturing down a different path. We need to expect that. It might be that now all of a sudden we were fully remote and then sort of started going back to the office. And now, you know, if you're in South Africa, we've got a few people internationally here as well on the call. You back to remote. So this chopping and changing between going in and not going in and not wanting to know, this uncertainty of not managed and communicated properly can be another reason, you know, why people are actually leaving the organization. So ask yourself the question, when you do the trend analysis, what is in your control? Okay? That should be your focus. You can only focus on what is actually, you know, within your control. Another big challenge that we've also found, and that's sort of been cited, is in this sort of remote environment now, okay, how do you make sure that there's still a learning culture? Okay, not so much just onboarding a person. If you haven't yet changed your onboarding practices, I want to say shame on you, but there's been sufficient time for you to actually do that, and you should be looking at doing that. But on the job learning, JP, what can businesses do to really foster a learning environment, getting people up to speed and creating remote learning opportunities?
And I think, Janko, I'm glad you mentioned on-the-job training there. I think that the default we spring to is kind of sending people on a course, a remote working course. This is how you use MS Teams. This is how you use Zoom. But the actual way of interacting and learning is actually different. And I think human capital, HR professionals, and L&D professionals have for years spoken about the 70-20-10 principle. But it hasn't always actually been implemented effectively, the 70% part, because you're so dependent on business. You're so dependent on your managers, your supervisors, your people leading the business to actually drive that 70% on the job training. You know, from a human capital team, a lot of them get frustrated because we're putting content out there for people to learn, and we're doing e-learning and we're doing training, and but we're not seeing the effect. And it's actually that 70 part of it where we do on-the-job training that's kind of been lacking, and especially in a time now where we're working virtually. We know that we have to make sure that those components of that 70 component of the 70-20-10 principle is actually focused on, and upskilling and making sure that our managers and our leaders know how to put forward our talents and how to put them into assignments and exposure and working environments that will help them develop. So I think, the basics need to be there. So proper virtual onboarding, like you said, e-learning, training courses, all of those kind of things need to be there. But I think there's a point where learning becomes like a maze, and we need to understand how all of that fits together and how I need to navigate myself through that. And I think, tomorrow we're going to be talking about employee experience in our masterclass. And I think a key component of that is kind of that journey you need to follow in the business and someone helping you understand what that looks like. So I think the focus we need to do is we need to shift our focus away from, or shift our focus on who our learners are. So our learners are not just individuals, but it's actually much broader. Is how do we educate our teams to make sure they're effective in this place? And then also we need to think differently of the where and when we do learning. Critical points in the business that we need to focus on is now the new type of learning we need to focus. It's not just skills, but how do I focus on making sure that business processes and where they do it and how they do it are effective, and then looking at how do I need to upskill them to meet the people there. So I think, in the past, we would have thought about, okay, if we educate the individual, so I'm going to start with point one, if we educate the individual, we give them training and they're fine, but actually in the broader ecosystem of the team, there might be a different development need, and the team as a whole might need something different. So an example here might be if you're implementing a new process or a new system, you're not just training one person, you're training the whole team, the whole department, you're making sure everybody knows how to do that process, how does it work, collaborating with them. So I think that's a key thing. And when we're working on that 70% principle, we need to work with our leaders to understand how do we give those stretch assignments? How do we give those challenging work projects that the team needs to work on? How can we work it around the team to make sure they're effective? And that's kind of also touching on our lead teams as well. And I think when we talk about the when and where, the second point that I mentioned, we need to look at how do we make sure that we target our learning to crucial points within the business? So where and when we provide learning, so that it makes sense within the bigger ecosystem and people understand that the learning makes sense in that space. I see a lot of businesses just saying, here's a catalog of 12,000 learning courses, go and upskill yourself. Or you're saying to a manager, here's a catalog of 1,000 e-learning courses, sit with your employee and find the learning that's appropriate to them. And actually, us as human capital professionals need to be closer to business to understand, actually, okay, this is the learning I need to bring in here, and this is the learning I need to bring in here, and how do I educate my manager to build it into the workplace? So I think, an example that I want to give here is a pharmaceutical company that, they were looking at improving the FDA approval process. So in America, when they submit a new drug to the market, they first have to get approval for the drug from the FDA. And they found that they had an extremely siloed, extremely fighting environment in the business that led to them and their overall process being delayed because they couldn't get people to work together to actually get the FDA approval. So couldn't get all the documents together, couldn't get all the evidence, the studies all together, the legal approvals. So what they actually did was they appointed a learning practitioner specifically for that process. They appointed an FDA learning practitioner. And that person's only responsibility was to say, okay, how do I make sure that the people on this process are trained and upskilled effectively to work across teams to deliver the FDA approval? And I think that's the type of thinking we need to do. And I'm not saying you need to employ someone for every single process, but how do we partner better at a business process level, to provide the learning that people need, rather than just providing the resources and we've done our job and we've put the stuff in place. So I think the last one I just want to touch on is almost like accountability. Is that 70% learning on the job does not happen without the accountability and keeping managers accountable for having these things happen. And I think you do that through many means, tracking, checklists, systems help you a lot with tracking these things. But it's keeping managers accountable to making sure that the employees get exposed to the experience that they need. And it's not just a paper or a line item on a system somewhere. So I think that's kind of in the broad sense. If we have to look at how do we do remote learning, there's a lot of technical things underneath that, and I think that's maybe something for another masterclass. But I think for now, with all of these things changing, remote working, some people from home, some people not from home, companies are seeing culture change a lot. And we spoke about this, and I think in Q&A 2 or 1 where we spoke about kind of company culture and what does it look like and how do you drive it. But I think one of the key questions we've been asked was specifically around, what do you do with saboteurs? The people who are really actively driving against the culture. In this instance, it might be a remote working culture that we're trying to embed in the business. And there's those individuals that are just really fighting against it and sabotaging it as far as they can. So Janko, how do we address this as HR professionals effectively in a business to make sure that we don't jeopardize the relationship with that individual or the broader team as a whole?
JP, yeah, so this is, let's just say that I've got strong views on something like this, and it might be a bit provocative. But I like to say, when you need to change the people, change the people. Okay, if we think about an elite team, let's use a sports team as an example. Okay. If they have a person, a player that is not performing, what do? Okay,
they have a very direct conversation with them around their performance.
I have a direct conversation with them, and if a person then is not performing, they are not selected.
Yep.
It's as easy as that. So if we take it a step back and we just think about the concept of culture, and we think about, but what is culture? So culture, in our opinion and our view, very much aligned to all the textbook definitions that you have. It's that combination of attitudes, experience, beliefs, values of the organization that is acquired through social learning, that is acquired through sort of engaging with each other. And culture is displayed in behavior. Okay? So culture is not displayed in your values, which is a poster on the wall, or if you find yourself now and you're quite progressive, a screensaver at least, so that you have some kind of cultural artifact. That is part of culture, but it is the way that people actually behave. And there's a lot of research that's been done on how detrimental just one person can be, the saboteur, as you said, the person that is sort of pushing back and kicking against what they know is required in order for this team to achieve. I mean, it has a significant negative impact on the team. Yet, our experience is that many managers sort of tolerate that because they are hesitant to have a conversation with that person. Now, you'll most likely see big consulting firms out there, they use words like honest conversations, rigorous conversations, etc. My opinion is a conversation should never happen if it's not honest. Okay? You should not be having, let's have an honest conversation type of workshop, because then you've got a problem in your organization, a serious problem, if people are not honest with each other. We need to then talk not about the conversation, but the broader system. So what can we practically do? I mean, and I want to bring it back to the sporting analogy. That is exactly what's going to happen. The coach, the manager, is going to have a direct conversation with a person that is not performing. So what do we sometimes see with our clients? You people on the call, HR professionals, you get an email, most likely. Oh, I have a problem with, let's pick on a name here, picking on a name on someone who's contributed, Tijen. Janko, Tijen in my team is not performing. Can you please have a conversation with her? Why? I mean, that's like asking the physio who's part of the team to sort out the defense pattern of a sports team. It's not their responsibility to be doing that. So we find ourselves, and unfortunately sit in a situation where managers are, first of all, hesitant to have the conversations and don't know how to have the conversations. Okay? So two things there. HR, you need to capacitate them. And secondly, you need to create systems to ensure that those type of people don't get into managerial or leadership positions. Okay? If, however, they do find themselves there, then you need to have that direct conversation with the individual. You need to help them understand what is the impact that they have on the team. Put them on. In South Africa, we have this thing called a performance improvement plan. Okay, so we have significant labor legislation that we need to comply with. It is not as easy as some countries where if they're not performing, you shift them out. You literally pack your box, as we see in, on Western TV. Okay? But what do we do in South Africa? And I say this very jokingly. What do we do with poor performers? We pay them a bonus, okay, because they're so protected. But put them on a performance improvement plan. Make sure that you comply with all the relevant legislative practices. Okay, it might be that something is happening in their life that you need to be aware of. Okay, but then if the performance improvement plan is not working, then make use of the processes, the governance of performance management to performance manage them out of the business. It is not fair unto them, or it is not fair unto the team or the organization for them to remain there. There's obviously something happening behind the scenes that you need to uncover, that the manager actually needs to uncover to understand what is happening here. So have those conversations, comply with the relevant legislative practices, give a person a fair chance to improve, make clear that they understand what fair means, okay? Contract on that, and then monitor, measure, and have a conversation. But the key thing is you cannot keep a person on your team who's pulling the team morale down. They might be a great performer, okay? So don't just limit this to KPIs. That's a mistake we see many of our clients make. They're limited to KPIs. This can be, as JP said, sabotaging behavior, negative input, okay? Pulling the team down, going against the values and the charter of the team. It is your right and your responsibility then to also, make sure that they are called to task, if I can use that word. And that, in my opinion, that is how you as an HR professional actually add significant value, is by pointing out and enabling the business to do so. Okay? We still, every single year, any big consulting firm that, that you follow, whether it is Deloitte, McKinsey, Korn Ferry, Bain & Company, Boston Consulting, PwC, Accenture, they all have got research centers with a lot of manpower, and they do, I can't use the word manpower anymore, a lot of capacity to do research, and they engage people and they ask, what do you want HR to do? And still every single year, they must add strategic value, okay? So JP, that is still an expectation from business. So my view then, if HR is thinking they're adding strategic value, because every year, time and again, it's being asked that they're not adding strategic value, it means that either the expectations of the business needs to be managed, or HR is not doing what it is supposed to be doing. So how do we bring that in? How do we bring in that strategic value add that the business is sort of calling for?
Thank you, Janko. And I do want to touch on a previous point made in terms of the culture shift, and I'll get you to the next one. I think Nokwazi made a very good comment in the comment box around empathy of leaders. And I think what Janko is getting to around this is to say that when you have that saboteur, the first step, the first natural step is to show empathy towards the individual. Understand where they're coming from, understand what challenges they're following, take them through the journey of making sure that they are taken care of as a human. But I think ultimately you need to get to a point where you're having those hard conversations with the individual, that within a sports team, within a company, in terms of high performing individuals, you need to be able to have those conversations. What we normally see is people are sometimes good at doing the empathy part, but they're not good at having a crucial conversation. And actually the biggest part of empathy comes in by having that conversation, by having that honest conversation and giving that feedback to the individual and saying, listen, there's distress on your side, there's distress on our side, this is clearly not working, and do the right thing for the relationship and for the individual, rather than not doing the right thing. And this person doesn't know where they fit into the bigger picture, and they kind of are kicking back because they kind of are back against the wall and actually in more distress than they would have been if you just had the conversation initially with them. So I think kind of just in the broad picture, and thank you, Nokwazi, for making that comment in terms of leaders and having empathy. Janko, the one that you sorry, go, Janko.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly elaborate or add on what you said there. And we've got a great comment and question that came through here from Valenice. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. We'll address that after JP spoken about strategic HR. So I'm very often when I talk about the concept of feedback and empathy, I actually have a picture of this screaming drill sergeant in the army, you know, with like veins popping right in the face of a cadet. When I talk to that, and people are like, they're very offended almost by that. And but it's exactly to your point. I mean, you know exactly where you stand with a drill sergeant. You know exactly where you stand with your commanding officer. Now, I'm not propagating that we go and we shout in a person's face, but there's actually a lot of empathy, you know, sitting behind that, because they know that it is their responsibility as an instructor of a Navy SEAL, potential Navy SEAL team, to make sure that you are capable and competent, because the life of the person standing next to you depends on you. Okay? That is what is sitting behind the way that they enact. So to me, that's actually a sign of empathy. To me, that's actually a sign of almost want to say servant leadership, because by displaying and crafting this capable soldier, this capable cadet, I am looking out for the people next to me, and I'm crafting a person that, in their case, you know, looks out for the country at the end of the day. Okay, so just maybe a bit of a provocative example on empathy and the importance of empathy. And then, as I said, we're going to get to Valenice's question, JP, right after you've sort of shared some insight into the whole strategic versus operational age-old debate that we're faced with.
Yeah, thank you, Janko, and I think that gives us good insight into the next one, which speaks to, you know, we have a lot of HR professionals, be it at different levels, that keep saying that they're stuck in operations, they're stuck in kind of the day-to-day stuff. They never get an opportunity to lift their head. They're just ticking boxes and running through the processes. Oh, it's performance review period, we do that. Oh, it's talent management period, we do that now. Now it's succession planning. Now it's whatever the step is in the human capital value chain, and they feel that they never get to that point where they are becoming a strategic business partner. And you know, there's a big difference between strategic planning and strategic thinking. And you know, every human capital team has got a strategy. Every human capital team has got a 3-5 year plan that's aligned to the business. You know, those type of things are kind of embedded in businesses normally. But I think there's a difference between that and actually thinking strategically as a human capital business partner and working with business. And I always laugh because this was so ingrained in me when I was working at Deloitte is what's the so what about what we're doing? You know, we're so used to just running these processes. And sometimes the strategic value that you add comes from just taking a step back and saying, okay, so what? We've now done the performance review process. So what? What is the ultimate goal we're trying to achieve with this? Are we just trying to get the processes done? And then business kind of sees you as a person who gets the processes done, or we're trying to add value to the business and saying, listen, we've done performance reviews, we're seeing, you know, these gaps with your team, they're not performing. But if I go and look further and I look at the learning that they've done, I've looked at the training that they've received for specifically on the job. And if I look at the full picture, I can give you guidance on why this performance is not happening, and then add strategic value, rather than saying, oh, the performance management process is done. These are your 6 non-performers. You have to put a PIP in place. And I think that's where the strategic value comes in, is asking that so what question. So what does this mean for the business? And you know, there's a quote from Conway that speaks to strategic thinking is identifying, imagining, and understanding possible and plausible alternative futures for your organization, not just one direction. And then using knowledge gained to strengthen your thinking about the potential options to position your organization effectively. So what all of this information, all of these processes that you're doing, how can I put that together to then position my business better, or position my business unit better, or position my leader better in the future? An example of maybe bringing in the previous question around culture and sabotage. if you as a human capital person, the kind of hygiene factor is to handle the situation or support business with handling the situation. But the strategic partnering comes in by saying, actually, I'm picking up that within the broader team, there's a trend of this happening. And I'm seeing that if these certain behaviors and ways of working continue, you'll consistently see this type of behavior coming up. So let's rather focus upstream and look at what we can do there to prevent this from happening again, and not just being the person who's very effective at managing employees out of the business. Ultimately, you don't want to have to do that. You want to be able to get way up the stream before those type of things even happen. And I think that's the hardest part, is you have to apply yourself in that situation. It's not just you kind of going through the motions. You have to apply yourself, and it takes more work to be that person in business. But that's what a strategic business partner is someone who puts down the amount of work that's necessary to get to where we need to be. And I think that's also part of bringing in and exposing yourself to what's happening outside in the market, what new developments there are, what new knowledge there is, what's new research that's been published. All of these things help you and become a tool in your toolbox to provide guidance and support and value add to your business that you would not have had if you didn't expose yourself to these tools and new research and learning in the market. As much as Janko spoke about it early in the beginning of the session around who looks after human capital, if we don't look after ourselves and make sure that we are developed, upskilled, and on top of what's happening, we won't be able to be the business partner that we need to be to the business. So I think from a strategic perspective, in a nutshell, practically, how you can apply it tomorrow is to say the things that we are doing now, what is the so what behind it? What does this mean to my business leader? It might have different meanings to your legal team than to your operations team, for instance, and using your skill set and knowledge to then say, okay, within your context, this is the so what. And that's where the strategic value comes from, and not just being the pen pusher who makes sure that everything happens. Janko, anything from your side?
Yeah, JP used the word there that I really like, is you need to apply yourself. And that is exactly what is required to be that strategic partner, to ask the question, so what? That takes application. Because if you ask the question, it's almost like, why are we doing this? The so what about, you need to have a bit of a broader context as to why you're asking that. It's about questioning the status quo. Okay, we're doing it like this. Why? Okay, very often I will engage, and now I'm going to say it as it is. We, as a firm, we don't very often actually get our business through HR. Okay, because we come in and we ask the why. And we see that you're doing performance management like this. Can you help us understand why you do it like that? And that is, you need to really defend yourself then. And our very mature and pioneering HR people, that is where we get business, because they like to be challenged. A strategic partner likes to be challenged, and they can defend what they say. Where people are, I'm going to say offended, but scared, is because they are not questioning it. They are not applying themselves. And by attending sessions like this, by attending our masterclass tomorrow, by subscribing to newsletters, putting yourself out there, learning, upskilling, that shows an inclination towards ultimately becoming that strategic partner, because you want to broaden your context so that when you go to your HR leader or to your line manager and say, well, I think we should do it this way, and this is why. Okay, you create credibility in terms of what you are saying. Okay? So fully support that. Really apply yourselves. Put yourself out there. That is how we add strategic value, JP. So thanks a lot for sharing that. We've got about 9 odd minutes to go. We had a question coming through from Valenice in terms of specifically around preferences, way of work, etc. I think a very insightful comment made by Ronel. Ronel, thank you very much for contributing there. A good example of why it is important to empower others to, and I want to say this, within parameters. come up with a solution. Okay. A key thing on working from home, working from the office, is to have at least some kind of parameter in place. And that is what you do by balancing preferences, personal circumstances, together with business requirements. You need to do a full analysis of the type of role, the output expected from the role, the type of resources that they need to have access to. Some of those roles needs to be in the office. Okay, that it is what it is. So when you rather create a framework where you have various categories of workers, okay, is this an office-based worker? Is that fully remote? Is it this? Is it that? Consult widely, get input from people, have consultation with leaders, have them sign off on those parameters, and then you almost treat it by an exception basis. You communicate, say, look, this is the category that you fall in. If you have different requirements, consult with your line managers. So one of the key things that we actually recommend is when you do engage in, let's say, performance contracting, aligning on expectations, is to have a conversation as to where do I work best? Is it at the office? Is it not at the office? Is it a combination? Balinese, as I said, you know, what we see very mature, I can't even use the word mature now because you can't be mature after 18 months of doing something. Pioneering organizations, intentional organizations do, is to consider when do I want my team to engage in person. And it's because there's a meeting of more than 4 people and the meeting is going to be longer than 2 hours. Then it's actually a workshop. And we know that in-person workshops, because of the synchronous nature of in-person engagement, is much better and more effective than online workshops. Okay? So have a conversation and have a think around what is best with regards to that. So just some thoughts on that, JP, if you want to add to that. And just want to invite everyone else, any other questions that we can sort of touch on in the next 5 minutes, please do fire away in the chat functionality.
Yeah, Janko, I just wanted to add something quickly, and it's something I heard this week, which is so true. And it's freedom within frameworks is the term, and you can go and Google it, and I think a lot of people know about it. It's you know, individuals, and you'll see it a lot with children. Those who have children, they kind of push to see where the boundaries are. They want to have the boundaries in place. And kids who don't have boundaries in place struggle in life, and then people who have boundaries in place, you know, perform much better. And I think as a leader in the business, it's around creating freedom for your team within a framework. So it's creating freedom for your team within boundaries and saying, you know, for instance, guys, you know, we're remote working, but I need you to be in the office 2 days a week. You choose your days, for instance. Or, you know, it's something like that where you provide them with the freedom of choice of what they do, but you still provide the framework within which it guides them in terms of what's good behavior or what's expected behavior, if I can put it that way. And then the person can make a decision and say, no, you know what, actually, I want to be in every day. Or no, you know what, I want to be in these days. Or, okay, cool, I'll take your guidance and I'll be in only 3 days a week. So I can then control, but I need a minimum of this in the week, and then I'm happy. So kind of those type of things are something you can look at in terms of how you manage those situations, is what's the minimum expectation, and kind of put in the framework that provides freedom.
Love that, JP. And that's a phrase that I also like to use, is that freedom in the framework, but it starts with the framework. No more questions forthcoming. At this point in time, I just want to sort of then close out. Tomorrow, we have our second EliteHR Masterclass. If you haven't yet signed up and you do have some time, please join us. You can go to the Human Interest website, humaninterest.co.za, click on events, click on the Masterclass. You can register for tomorrow. So I'm going to say it like it is, you know, attendance is free, but I want to guarantee the experience will be priceless. So we have a guest faculty member tomorrow, Dr. Dieter Veldsman. It is the first time that we are having a guest faculty member. The intention is going forward with all the master classes to also invite to various colleagues. So if there are certain people that you would like to hear from, where you would like to have the opportunity for one-on-one engagement, please reach out to me, send through those names so that we can contact them and create a platform where you can engage. Tomorrow we will be focusing on the employee experience. JP has already alluded to that. Dieter will be sharing some of his experience. We'll be sharing some practical case studies in terms of how you actually go about crafting that. So tomorrow is not only for HR professionals. We actually also have a few business people wanting to attend because employee experience is just coming to the fore. We're going to touch on the concept of feedback. So I want to invite you and encourage you to join us tomorrow. Also just see some other questions and coming through here. Just want to read here from Valenice. Okay, so Valenice, we are not going to do a response to your question justice, okay? Where you talk around how do we create this virtual remote succession, performance, etc. We will make note of that. That could be something that we dive a bit deeper into either in next month's Q&A or as part of a masterclass, but you're going to have to be very intentional around that. We cannot just rely on the same old practices. Any last questions, comments, apart from the one that I've positioned that we'll put on the parking lot for another round of conversations? You're welcome to put your hand up. I'll bring you into the conversation. I love the conversation engagement that we had in the chat. Thanks a lot for that. This recording will be made available. You will find it on our website. So you would have noted that we had a bit of an enhancement. So all our videos, all the previous Q&As, the previous masterclass on performance management in a new reality, that's also on the website. If you've got specific questions that you want us to address, email me. You do have my email because you received a mail from me today that we can address next month. Please do reach out. This really is a platform where we can collaborate, where we can share. Get practical, similar to tomorrow's masterclass. And obviously this recording will also be on the website during the course of next week. Colleagues, with that, thank you very much for your time and attendance. JP, once again, thanks for your very, very insightful comments. Thanks to everyone on the call for participating and for joining and for staying for the duration of the session. It's really great. This is our fourth one. We're excited about the next ones that's coming. Please spread the word. Let's engage more. Let's get more people so that we can build our profession. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.